welcome to the first ever episode of LRC. That is Left, Right, and Center. I am your host and moderator, Taryn. And today I am joined by Donovan.
Hello.
And my buddy, Will. Will?
Hey! I said hey. What's happening?
Did you hear him say hey? I didn't hear him say hey.
I did not hear him say hey.
Jesus, it's the first
okay,
episode.
Well, I did.
And you've already fouled it up!
Well, I mean, we were all expecting it.
All right.
Does this mean Will loses this argument
Yes.
automatically? Just
Wait,
awesome.
what?
No, there's no scoreboard. There's no real winner here. This is just a discussion. We're three friends, differing backgrounds, differing religious views, political views, socioeconomic statuses, all the good shit, And we're going to be coming together once a week, discussing all sorts of stuff. This week, however, we're going to be discussing hating the U.S. in 2022. Since, it's the new year.
Happy New Year.
Yay!
Yay. We did not plan that.
Could you tell? First, I'd like to open up by, I guess, asking each of you personally, how you feel about the states, just in general, not necessarily the government, but just, obviously the government's gonna be part of it, but, just the country as a whole, I suppose, in general. How do you feel about living here? And either of you have a preference? Who wants to open it up?
I don't care, Donovan, go right ahead. Unless you want me to go first.
Oh, I was leaving it open for you if you wanted. But I can definitely go first.
So I guess just to re-clarify, just how do you feel about the United States and I guess just living here as an American?
I have a very kind of duality of a feeling about the US. I definitely feel blessed living in the United States.
Right.
I feel, there's a lot of different places I could be where things could be a lot worse for me.
Right.
But at the same time, there are things that I definitely would change or personally do differently than what the country is currently doing. And
you mean just politically, you mean?
Yeah, just on a political spectrum, but even state by state kind of level, there's I'll bring up an example real quick, the Texas snowstorms, and wiped out a lot of power in Texas just last year, I believe, or the year before, the winter before.
Yeah, just recently.
And they had an entire year to winterize their equipment, or at least, their gas lines, which provide 40% of the power to Texas. And they just didn't. And that's one of those things, it's simple infrastructure, it seems to get lost in the hullabaloo.
Right.
But
well, so I guess without getting too far down that rabbit hole, how do you feel about the culture that the move? I guess and what I mean by culture is the slang, the comedy,
America
the entertainment
is definitely a melting pot of culture, which I just absolutely love because there's something called like cultural bleed, societal bleed, where all these cultures, once they interact with each other long enough, end up picking up certain, traditions and stuff like that. And so a lot of the slang we use comes from people who still living in the US are culturally different from us. And it just becomes so widespread that I truly believe that we are trendsetters in the world as the US. Like a lot of stuff gets out to the other countries that started and originated in the US, which is just, I think, awesome.
All right, cool. Thanks. Well, I'm going to open it up to you.
Yes.
Same question, essentially. How do you feel about the United States as a nation, as a whole, and living here as an American? And what do you like or dislike about the culture surrounding it?
I, I actually don't disagree with a lot of what Donovan said. I feel very blessed to live here, and I can't imagine living anywhere else in the world. If it came down to a debate where it was like, well, if you were to live anywhere but the United States, where would you live? I'm like, well, you're just thinking through it as like, well, I pointing those countries I don't like this here, and all that.
Right.
Uh,
Aspects that you like here
yes,
or don't like there.
I think that not to get too political about it, I think that, and sort of part of what we're talking about today is, I don't think that there's actually necessarily a lot of disagreement, even on both sides, on what some problems are, right? That there are problems with America, what some of the problems are. I think that most of the disagreement tends to come in what we think the solution to said problems are. And I guess my biggest frustration is actually the polarization.
Well, and that's a lot of
Because
what we're kind of here doing today is we're trying to open up that dialogue of
I
that
lament
polarization.
the fact that people would find it odd that me and Donovan are friends, right? We have totally different political viewpoints, but I don't actually think of liberal people as inherently bad, right, or evil.
What?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just show over. Just shut it off. Yeah.
What are the headlines supposed to read now?
Yeah, no, but I think that's my biggest complaint, is that nobody can, the culture, that's my biggest complaint with the culture right now, is that nobody can just hold the conversation anymore. It's got to be a rant or a Twitter debate, which isn't an actual debate. It's just two people ranting,
Right.
typically. And I actually think that those conversations are important to have, right? Those disagreements are important to have.
Well,
for a
lucky for
smooth
you,
functioning democracy.
I think everybody here is in agreement on that. So,
yeah,
I think that is why we've come together to respectfully disagree on a multitude of things. I think, kind of just putting my 2 cents in there, I sort of feel that we're living in a time where it seems clear to me, at least living here, that there is a lot of vitriol and just kind of an underlying distaste for the US. And maybe that's just the loud speaking louder than you know, the many quiet, but it definitely just it just feels like it in the air. Like there's not a lot of I guess patriotism maybe is the word.
Yes. I hear what you're saying there. I get what you're saying. Negativity always gets more play than
Which is
positivity.
odd for me because I've never really considered myself a patriot by any means or really all that patriotic, but I don't feel like I'm like anti-establishment. Well, I mean, I guess maybe in some ways, but not to the point of I think we should tear everything down from the ground up and restart. But anyways, I think that sort of segues well into the question that you had asked, Will, which is sort of, what are we comparing the US to? Why are we why might people feel this way? Why is there this underlying sort of feeling out there? Is it because, and why is there people that maybe don't feel that way? Why is there, because it seems like the people that hate America are just, they don't understand why you wouldn't hate America. It seems like they're just as confused by the other.
You could say the same thing about the people who like absolutely love proud to be American people don't understand why you wouldn't love America.
Right.
So
so with that, I guess maybe I'll start with you this time, Will, and I'll ask you, what do you compare the standard of America to? Why does and how does that, I guess, shape your view of it?
So I sort of tend to compare America to two sources. One, I compare it to sort of the sense of morality and ethics that I get from being a Christian. And that is probably pretty difficult to do sometimes because humans often do wrong things that are against that, and governments are no different. I also compare it. So that's like in a broader philosophical sense.
Right.
In a sort of day-to-day sense, I tend to compare America to history and to other countries. And I think it's, I may be stretching a little bit here, but I think that it's kind of hard to hate America when you actually look at like what history has been. That's not to say America doesn't have problems, but I find it very hard to hate America when I look at history, right? Because life has never been particularly good, or better way to put that, life has never been better than it has been in America today when compared to the rest of world history. So that's sort of what I compare it to.
Which makes sense, being that you are a history teacher.
Yes. Yeah.
And so making comparisons to history is probably pretty, yeah, I mean, you know a lot about history, so it of course you're going to make those types of correlations of,
yeah, it gives a sense of perspective, I think.
Right.
So
yeah, I think I'm sort of the similar belief that I think history is a big importance, I suppose, to trying to figure out what we should do going forward or maybe what wrong steps were made, at the very least.
right.
Maybe not what the right move is, but well, that didn't work out,
Yeah. Avoiding the mistakes of the past is a good way to start improving the future.
Right.
Sort of what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, with that, will flip over to Donovan. Yeah, sort of same question with what do you compare the U.S. to today, and how does that shape your view?
So I've never spiritually really felt too attached to America as a country. I've never really felt attached to any country. However, from history, from what we were told about America growing up and stuff, it's supposed to be the land of the free, home of the brave, and just for me, that truly means like top of the lists everywhere. Education, healthcare, just quality of life kind of thing.
Like
And
the American dream, essentially. The
right,
manifest destiny.
being able to support yourself on a single paying job and go to college on that job, and just that kind of like whole, you're free to make your choices and do what you want to do and live your life, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all of that. And so when comparing, I don't look back, I look around. And so I'm looking at places like Denmark, Norway,
I mean, could
Canada.
you say that you maybe look forward even? Like, I mean, would
I
you say that you maybe look to like a utopian, like potentially in some ways?
I've definitely been called an idealist, and I do believe in a utopic society,
But
truthfully.
but I mean, that's not necessarily like a bad thing. I mean, that drives. I mean, complacency is what drives failure in a lot of ways. Being sitting and being okay with things as they are.
And
That's not a good way to be either.
and so that's kind of what I see, in the places I mentioned, a lot of Europe and stuff, they're getting from work, they're getting paid time off to go on vacation, and they're literally forced and required to take those vacations. They
Yeah, Americans
pay
are
maternity leave,
the
and
most overworked people in the world besides Japanese people, I think.
yes, I do believe that statistic is close to correct. We can fact
Yeah,
check
someone
that
someone
in
could
post,
yeah, someone
probably.
could check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that at least when it comes to like amount of hours worked to the amount of time off that you get and the amount of time off that Americans actually take,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
pretty crazy actually.
So I was about to say, I think that going to our main topic of hating America in 2020, I think the reason that there tends to be this perception of liberals hating America or Democrats hating America is uh so try and follow my
Well,
chain of
just
logic here, because I think
just
think this is what happens. Oh, go ahead.
interjecting really quick on just that real is, while I do sort of agree that a lot of the mentality of hating the establishment, of hating America is there, I think on the reverse side of that, a lot of hating the current culture of what America is a very Republican ideal and conservative ideal. Like I mean, hating anything pop music or rap music, hating, movies and TV shows. I mean, a lot of times it's, Republican conservative people that are also not real creative mindset, not real open minded to, you know, exploring in
Uh,
those avenues. I would argue personally.
yeah, I sort of get what you're saying there, and it is a bit on both sides. I'm trying to get to, because here's the thing. I don't think most liberal people unless they're pretty explicit about it, actually hate America.
Right.
I was gonna say sort of this is the
Right.
chain, and sort of what I think happens is that I think most liberals are like Donovan, and they sort of compare America to what they think a perfect world would be. And the world not being perfect, see, I think there's a difference between idealism and optimism, right? The world not being perfect causes them to become a little bit bitter, and they tend to get into these sort of navel gazing, sort of focus on the negative, right? I think that's what conservatives tend to target when they say liberals hate America, is this idea that they're like, you're only focusing on, yeah, this is just what I feel, so you might have a different perspective on this, Donovan, but I feel that it's not so, we seem to assume that liberals hate America because they're only focused on problems, whereas counterpoint, or the corollary to that, is liberals seem to think that, conservatives are these jingoist nationalists wanting to rewrite history because they want to focus on the positive of the country, or what they perceive to be the positive of the country.
I will say you were right. That's actually a really good segue, because my point would be, and I refer to, I actually had posted in our Discord an article
Yes.
out of
Is it time to?
it's Massey
Is it time
University.
to go over to Article Alley? Is that what you're saying? It's time to use my transition?
Really excited because he put the most work into this than any of us.
I believe this is the one you... Yes, do a third of Americans really hate their own country? From the University of New Zealand.
I mean, like I said, I do feel blessed to be in America.
Right.
But at the
And-
same time,
Well, and I think that on both sides there tends to be this knee-jerk reaction. This is something else I wanted to bring up, because I read your article and it was definitely written by a left-leaning person, right? Because the way it treats left people and the way it treats right people, it's not exactly unbiased. I wasn't expecting.
Well, it's written... Well, for one, it was written at a university.
Yeah.
2, it was written by a professor at the university. And 3, it was written at a university, the University of New Zealand, which I would argue is more left-leaning of a country, at least if you were to compare it to American ideals.
Yes, and I'm not discounting, because I think the article did bring up some really good points. I think it actually, that's why I said, I think that there's this perception by conservatives that pointing out problems and focusing on problems that the country are facing means that you hate America, or demanding that certain solutions that liberals think are good solutions be pursued, and anybody who doesn't agree with those solutions is a bad person. That also contributes to it as well. This perception that they hate American and American idealism.
Well, I think with
And
both,
all
it's kind of like
ideals.
well, and
it's like with each reaction, it's like
sorry,
a counter reaction, right? In like there's an overreaction to the
Yep.
reactions, right? So it's, you get one person that doesn't like that, they don't like the US, they say the US sucks, and then so as a hyper reaction to that, they say, well, America's perfect. You know,
Well,
and
that's
then-
what I was about to say. Is that the American exceptionalism that Donovan's pointing to? I think that this is what I find, right? Because I actually do think that America is the greatest country on Earth, and probably the greatest to have ever existed. That doesn't mean that we're the greatest in all of these standards. I just mean that we're the freest, most prosperous society to ever exist, and we do, but I don't think we're perfect. And I think there's this conflation that when you say best, that means that either I think America's perfect or I think other places are bad, right? Like, I don't think other places are bad. I think other places have things they can teach America. But there's this assumption that when you say America is the greatest country on earth or American exceptionalism, that you think that America's perfect and we don't need to change anything and there are no problems and we're not going to deal with that. There's this assumption on the left that I don't think a lot of people on the right actually believe. There's obviously some that are that patriotic and believe that, but I don't think most people on the right actually believe that. Just like I don't think that when a liberal says, I think we have a serious problem with incarceration in the United States, that they hate America, right? I don't think that. But there's this desire to there's a knee-jerk reaction
There's
on both sides.
outliers to both. There are people
Right.
that really do hate America, and there's people that really do,
Right. And
overlook all the
and
faults.
I think that the point I want to make is that I don't think most people fall into that category. I think most
I think most people
love
follow
their country.
somewhere. I mean, right. I mean, at least in some ways, like even if you don't realize it, I think, a lot of people would be remiss to be, it's somewhere else in a lot of, for a lot of people.
Well, I think the most interesting people to talk to about America are immigrants.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they often have views you don't expect them to have, right?
They
So,
oftentimes are less critical of the U.S. than people in the U.S.
people
are.
who are born here, yeah.
Right. Well, that's kind of that's sort of one of the greatest things about the U.S. is we're almost our greatest critic, right?
Yeah. I mean,
maybe not
quite a bit, but
yeah, okay, you're right on that. But I would say that
you French?
America's biggest critic is ourselves. Like I mean, if anybody's giving us shit for the stuff we do, it's us.
Well, and that's part of that's actually kind of part of the founding fathers' vision, right? Been of flaws, yes, but part of their vision was we want to create a government that can be criticized by the people. We want to create a society that can be criticized by itself.
Right.
That's why things like freedom of speech are enshrined, because it's like, well, you should be allowed to criticize the government, right? You should be allowed to criticize other people.
Well, Donovan, do you have any?
No, there's a meme comic that goes around. I'm sure I could find it. But it speaks of a tolerant society. And it speaks to that you cannot have a tolerant society without being intolerant to intolerance.
I mean, that can make sense to me. I mean,
but I guess my
question
question with that meme is, what do you mean by being intolerant towards intolerance?
So, I tend to kind of equate tolerance and complacency. I
guess I could kind of see that.
lot
But
I mean,
you
I
have
see it as
tolerate to just become complacent. Like it's one of those, your job schedules you and makes you work an hour and a half late, and what are you gonna do? Quit? No, you need the money. You're gonna stay late, do what you gotta do, and get out of there. That's
speaking from experience.
Tolerate it. It's not pleasant, but you have to.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. Like, I'm confused by what do you mean by we can't tolerate intolerance?
I mean, to me, that says like authoritarian like viewpoints and things. Like you
Right,
can't we
like
can't tolerate something. We can't tolerate a tyrannical, authoritative
Which
like
goes
viewpoint
into the freedom
in
of
order to
speech
have a
of it
free
is
society. Which I agree with. I agree we can't
you
tolerate
need to
that type
be
of
able to
mindset.
criticize and point out, flaws and go, listen,
okay.
we can do this better, you know.
See, because like
There needs to be that sort of like rebellion and kind of, like, hey, we're shouting now, strikes and stuff like that to
well, because
get multiple voices heard to
I
that kind
think
of
the
stuff.
phrase you use, the reason I wanted the clarification is the phrase you use could mean multiple different things. Definitely become the authoritarian if you're not tolerating intolerance and you define intolerance as anything you disagree with.
Found the comic
I
actually.
and I'm not saying you're saying that, Donovan. I just wanted the clarification.
Back to Article Alley so soon.
I bring the noise to Article Alley, okay? Just saying.
Let's look at this. The paradox of tolerance. Should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? No Nazis! You want more tolerance? Respect my ideas. The answer is no. That's my impression of a Nazi.
It's a paradox. But unlimited tolerance can lead to the extinction of tolerance. Yeah.
I get what you're saying there. I think the trouble lies, and I don't think anybody would disagree with, say, not tolerating Nazis in the society. But I think the difficulty is, and I think we've seen this from some parts of the left, right? The identifying people as Nazis that are nowhere near close to Nazis, right? The identifying of people as racist or white nationalist as when they're just, even when they're just like asking a question or they're trying to learn or they're trying to do that, like I think that idea, that paradox of tolerance, hinges on how we as a society define, so the Overton window, I guess you'd call it, define what is tolerable and how wide or narrow should that window be. Right? Because I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to disagree with, say, censoring Nazis, but
Well, that's the thing, right? This speaks strictly to unlimited tolerance. Like,
so basically what I'm hearing is you're more advocating for a balance between tolerance and intolerance.
I may be one of those dirty liberals you talk about, but I do believe that we need both sides. We need the idealism
I don't
and
think
the
you said you were
realism.
dirty, to be fair.
Well, and
Well,
see,
I said
here's
I
the
was
thing,
dirty. I'll
ironically.
give you that one.
Here's the ironic thing, Donovan, is that's something we actually both agree on, right? You probably view me as I don't know what
Nazi?
adjective you would put on Nazi. Okay, sure. You probably view me as a
I would
Nazi.
not. For clarification, I would not.
So
But
there,
go ahead.
he's laughing because that has always been the joke, is that I'm a Nazi. So but I actually agree with you that let me put it this way. I would never want your side to be totally in charge. I would also never want my side to be totally in charge.
Oh God.
Because I think
actually
both
agree with that.
I think that our system is predicated on the byplay between those two things. It's why we wound up with a two-party system when nothing in the United States specifically bars more parties from occurring. Is there needs to be a balance between those two forces.
Well, now I think there's a lot of money behind it, but that's another
Yeah, that's true
Yeah.
too. But
discussion.
I didn't
entirely.
say I didn't say that's why it's perpetuated. I said that's why it came to be.
Well,
Right?
I think you guys have made some good points. I wanted to actually share some things with you. Just
All right.
some interesting things that I found. Actually found 5 interesting positive facts and 5 negative facts about the US
Right.
to just kind of share with you guys, share with everybody else, you know, so you can kind of maybe some shit you didn't know. Can't say I didn't teach you nothing.
I can say it.
Well, okay. But like don't.
Okay.
So first off, there are 270 million guns in the US, 5 times more than any other nation. Can you guess which list this one's from?
Ooh.
Guess it depends
I'm
on
gonna say-
your opinion on guns, but
I'm gonna say that one's probably in the good side of.
Oh.
this is
Depends on your opinion of the Second Amendment. I would put it in the good column, but well, okay, sorry. How many of those guns are in the hands of legal owners?
Technically all of them because they're registered.
well, not all of them. I don't know how many of them are legal, but this is to me a negative thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the US needs 5 times more guns than any other nation. Personally.
I think that the Second Amendment discussion is probably one to save towards later.
Right, but well, this was something I put in the negative just to clarify. I mean, you can argue whether or not it really is negative, but personally, I don't think I'm not opposed to Second Amendment. I'm not opposed to people having guns, but if you think we need 5 times more than any other country in the world, I think you're maybe a little delusional. Or
Yeah, I
maybe
don't
you just
think
really
we
like fucking
need-
guns. If your argument is you
Well,
just
here's-
like guns, then okay, you like guns.
I don't think we need that many, but I don't know how you prevent in a world with the Second Amendment. I don't know how you prevent that many from being sold or purchased or bought or owned. Because if you're
mean,
allowed to own one gun, should
I don't
you
necessarily
be allowed
disagree,
to own
but
more than one? I mean, like,
I think this is a discussion for another, because I could go into this one.
it was. I mean, you can be just a little bit back and forth, but you know, it was mostly just a statistic to give you, just to mull it around in your head.
I find it fun. Both me and Donovan were baffled for a second when you said which column is this in, because it was like, well, I mean, that single statistic could really be put in either column depending on how you're arguing.
Well, that's kind of
so.
that's kind of why I wanted to pose it to you. Was just because really, however you look at it, it could be either. But just to clarify, I did put it in the more negative list, so that is one of the ones off. So now I'll give you, I guess, we'll bounce back and forth. I'll give you a positive one now. Let's say America has more world-class athletes and the most prominent music and movie industries. And that's something you guys probably knew, but if you didn't know, now you know.
Yep, our culture's a monolith, that's for sure.
Yeah, and with the world-class athlete thing, that is pertaining to like the Olympics and stuff. Yeah.
And stuff.
We had the most Olympic gold medalists and most like famous international athletes, like just like Michael Jordan, like he's just super famous all around the world.
Big
stuff.
true. Props to my man Jordan.
Okay then. I have nothing to say on sports ever. So
Back into the negative. 46% of Americans don't believe in evolution. Now, again, depending on who you are, you could decide whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, I find that a little alarming.
I guess I'm gonna say I'm ambivalent because that's an argument I've had a long time in the religious community, and in terms of my own religion, I've come to the conclusion that those are two separate things, whether or not you believe in God and whether or not you believe evolution is a thing.
Right.
Like, I believe you can be both a Christian and believe in evolution. So,
Well,
you know.
I think to my point, to be more blunt about it, from my point of view, I don't think there's any amount of believing you have to do, because I think evolution is just a fact, and it can be proven pretty
Well,
substantially. And I don't think there's really any amount of arguing there really should even be done with about it at this point. I kind of feel like we should be past it. Like and
I
the
will
fact that there's
play
this many
I'm
people that
advocate
still
ambivalent.
for
I
a
mean-
second. I will play devil's advocate for a second. The argument is that it's a theory. It's the theory
yes,
of evolution.
but it's
But
a big T
but-
theory. It's scientific theory. It's not definitional
No,
Merriam-Webster's theory. So it's not
definitely, but they don't see it written out.
Well,
But that's
They
what I'm
hear it.
saying.
well, and
People don't. That's what a big misconception for people is. They don't understand that there's a difference between scientific theory that's been proven through thousands and thousands of papers and
I'm actually
researches
of the
and
same thought as Will. We don't share religious backgrounds, but why can't both be?
well, I'm not saying one can't.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that.
yeah,
I'm not saying that they both can't be
Right.
true. I mean, personally, I don't personally believe in God, but I don't think necessarily, like in Will's circumstance, I don't think it's absurd for him to be able to believe both, right? I mean,
yeah, no,
I don't
and I
find that
don't think
absurd.
it's absurd, and I guess
If he
what
believes
Taryn's
in a
pointing
being
out-
that can do anything, then why can't the thing that he believes that can create anything also create evolution, and that also be a thing? Like, that makes sense to me. Like,
yes,
Absolutely.
so, but it's like
We can get-
it's the straight denial of like science. It's almost like it feels like some. Obviously, this is a more radical belief, but it feels like certain like radical, I guess, creationists think that that science is its own religion almost. And I get the sentiment, I guess, in some ways, but it's like but it's not though. That's the whole point. It's not a religion. It's based on facts. It's not based on what I think or what I believe. I mean, sometimes for people that's their how they come to discover things. You know what I mean? They think something might be true, and then they test things, and then they find it to be true.
I will play devil's advocate again. There is a
We don't
certain
need two
level
devils.
there is a certain level of faith in scientific research.
I
You
mean-
don't just start researching something going, oh, well, I'm
Well,
probably not going to find any. You're always like.
In the same way
I'm
that
gonna
I would
find
say that
something.
I get what you're saying, like in the. I mean, you could make the same argument about like evolution, right? Like, what studies have you and me done personally to prove evolution?
Right.
I mean, well, I don't know.
Sure.
I can't prove evolution to you through my own studies, but I can point you to a bunch of studies that can prove it.
Actually, there's a pretty easy you can do with flies, but I wouldn't recommend doing it at home, kids.
Well, and I'm not gonna pull Donovan and play a devil's advocate here, but I'm in a religious community. Me and Donovan come from different religious background, but I don't know how practicing Donovan is actually. So I've always assumed not very practicing, but that might have been an unfair assumption.
No, it's a totally fair assumption.
Okay. Well, I'm part of so even though I'm ambivalent towards it, I hear the arguments more, and you're not. People get weird when they're introduced to either facts or because going to Descartes, you can't actually 100% prove really anything except that you think that you are. And people tend to get threatened by something that their confirmation bias can't deal with.
Existential.
Because all humans have a tendency to take any new data and sort of force it into the framework of what they already think, even if it doesn't exactly fit. And
Right.
when evolution initially came about, there was no way for people to do that. It was just sort of viewed as this hostile sort of, I guess you could call parasitic sort of thing in society. And so there was this massive overreaction to it in the Christian community, which is I think what accounts to that. Because like I kind of agree with the sentiment that like I guess my question with it is why do I or should I care what somebody believes about the theory of evolution? That's sort of where I sort of
That's a
come
deep
down on it.
question.
I mean,
That's a deep question.
that gets into the whole philosophical debate of why should you care what anybody thinks about anything, but
Well, I care what people. So
but
on
hold
that
on,
note,
hold
I
on.
care.
On that note,
Uh,
we're segueing into the next fact.
Okay, go ahead. Yes,
So-
go ahead.
Positive fact number 2. We have more immigrants than anywhere else in the world at roughly 45 million people.
I have no reservations with that. I would
Oh,
agree
yeah.
that that's a positive thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is why it's in the positive facts. I mean, at least for me, it's a positive thing. I would argue that that's a positive thing.
I made the point earlier that America's culture is, it's literally kind of like a culture leech, and just kind of, as new cultures come in and evolve and change and everything, it all just kind of.
Well, and I also view it as an indication of. It's always a pretty good, I think, indicator of how good your country is by how many people want to come and live there as opposed to other places. And lots of people want to come live in America. So I think
We
that's a
were
good
all
indicator.
immigrants once.
I wasn't.
Well, I mean, ancestrally.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying technically.
Yeah. He's technically
I was
correct,
born
which
here.
we all know is the best kind of correct.
I mean, at what point do I just become considered, American? You know what I mean?
How
many more generations?
Born on American soil.
Right, but how many more generations before ancestrally I'm just considered American?
That's an
That's a
excellent
good question for Donovan.
I just wonder because that actually is a very great segue into a video that I found. which is... Let us go over to the clip of the day.
Clip of the day. Clip of the day. It's the clip of the day.
Never sing that again.
You can't
And
stop me.
I will go ahead and
I could, but I'm too lazy.
stream that to you boys so you can see it.
Eat.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
This is what do Europeans really think about Americans?
Anyone want
Ayo.
to try out an American accent for me?
Yeehaw! Howdy, partner. Going down to do some shooting.
Accurate.
Hi,
Accurate.
I'm Ben, and right now I'm traveling
I
through
mean, I
Europe,
live in the
and I
South, and
figured
that's
I
how
would
we
ask
all talk.
Europeans along the way, what do they think of Americans? Let's go find out. I want you to be as honest as you can, all right? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Americans?
Loud and
Loud.
loud.
Is it loud?
Pretty loud sometimes.
Loud. Everyone says loud.
Friendly. Like nice. Good teeth.
They like to drink beer.
Friendly.
They're nice people.
They like drinking as the Austrians.
Enthusiastic.
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
A lot of people saying friendly.
I like
Yeah.
that they all tried to say something nice about America.
Yes, I like
have
that
a
too.
feeling they didn't put everybody they interviewed into this
Yeah.
video because
I mean, loud is sort of neutral, let's be honest.
yeah, loud. They also said, what else did they say?
Well, we Americans
Friendly,
aren't really loud.
Enthusiastic. But the one that said enthusiastic said it like, I'm trying to criticize them while paying them a compliment sort of voice.
Right.
Like,
I
I'm trying not to offend him.
if you go back a bit, if you go just to where she said that, yeah, I think that's her. Nope.
They're nice
Next
people.
one.
They like drinking as the Austrians.
Enthusiastic.
What's
Yeah,
the first thing that comes to
Enthusiastic.
She
mind
was from
when you think
she
of
was from Britain,
Americans?
so that's how they
well, they the
that's how
biggest
they do it
haters.
there. They are.
Yeah.
They just mad because we got away.
Yeah.
America 1, Britain 0, A. Okay.
Superficial.
We like Americans.
Superficial.
They're always quite
That I actually liked her answer there. That's
That was deep, wasn't it?
Okay.
she took
Yeah.
a second. She thought
Yeah.
about it.
Americans. They're always quite.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Americans?
Superficial.
We like Americans.
I mean, that was quick, but she's not wrong.
She isn't.
I would say that's a pretty apt description of a lot of places in the U.S. and kind of a lot of the mindset, especially
can
the younger
agree with that, yeah.
generations.
Oh, jeez. Tell me about it.
Thanks, Iceland, for seeing the truth.
Yeah, right. Even though your country's a lie. I'm just saying.
That's actually true. It is a lie.
Americans. They're
Iceland
always
exists.
quite cool. They like.
No,
fast
but
food.
it's
We
not
don't like
icy,
that so
it's
much,
green.
but when we are there, we enjoy it.
I mean, the stereotypes is like kind of fat and all that.
Fast food.
They eat a lot of food. Like the portions are like
Yeah, we are fat.
burgers and Coke.
Yeah.
Food very
Yeah,
fast.
I think of fast
We do
food
have big
restaurants.
portions.
Five Guys. I love Five Guys.
Okay, so of all the
Yeah,
things
she knows what's
about
up.
America,
Five Guys
the one
too.
thing you
Yeah.
can think of.
What
And I
up?
think of Trump too.
Donald Trump.
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 Like Donald Trump, innit? Just everyone hating on him.
I can hear Donovan dying. I can hear Donovan dying on the inside.
Craziest president ever be seen, man. He's gotta start a war in this world.
I like the Trump. Yeah.
You do?
Yes.
I like it.
What do you like
Yeah,
about
actually,
Trump?
He's
Switzerland
mean
really
about
liked Trump.
the world and about the situation now.
You like him because he's mean?
He's very racist. He doesn't really know anything about politics.
When you see like Americans,
Ah,
really
a German
open-minded,
calling
they're,
America
like,
racist.
Yeah,
most of
that's
them are really smart.
well,
And we
ironic.
can't understand that Trump is your president.
That's a big laugh, you know. People voted for him. You get what you very voted for.
Like I know everyone basically in Europe is against Trump, but I think they needed a change. I just think that the two coasts dominate it, and there's so many people in the middle. They don't get heard, and they're finally getting heard.
Yeah, that this lady's too educated. She needs to get out of here. Like, sorry, lady,
She's a witch.
sorry, we
She's
were
a
taking
witch.
uneducated people for interviews today.
She's not wrong though. That's the
Well, that's what I'm saying. She's
big part.
Yeah.
she's. I mean, that was probably the most accurate description of
Some
why
of-
Trump won right there.
Yeah.
I do like in America that everyone's kind of, if you're born there, you're American. And if you're from another country and you're moving to Austria and your children are born here, you're still like, yeah, I'm from Austria, but you know, my heritage is this and that.
America is the land of chance.
I kind of disagree with that. I don't think that's true. Kind of like with what we were just saying. Like even is like, I'm not considered Native American. I'm considered Irish and Swedish. Even though, if I went to either of those places, they'd be like, "You're American."
Well, counterpoint, because that was a European perspective, and America is actually one of the first countries on Earth. You could argue Rome, but America judged whether or not you were American, especially at the beginning of our country, based on ascribing to a certain ideal, not being born somewhere. You can argue that we don't necessarily we still call Italian immigrants Italian Americans. They don't do that in Europe. You'd say, I'm from Austria, but I'm Italian, right? Like, your nationality is based on your genetics. You don't really get that in America. Is I think more what they're getting at.
I mean, I guess I see your point, but I would argue that Americans try pretty hard to differentiate themselves culturally. If there's like even the slightest, like, you know what I mean? Like, if there's any even slight cultural difference to differentiate you from somebody else, then that's what you are.
Oh, I grew up in an Italian home. So,
Right, I'm Italian,
I know
right?
how to cook,
Right.
You know.
I mean, yeah, they're American, but you know what I mean? They're going to identify with being Italian. They're not going to identify with just being straight
Well,
American.
I think it would be more interesting to ask immigrants how they feel about that. Like, because that's what I'm saying is that I think she's referring more to how people self-identify.
Well, listen to what she says.
We try and distinguish ourselves.
Everyone's kind of, if you're born there, you're American. And if you're from another country and you're moving to Austria and your children are born here, you're still like, yeah, I'm from Austria, but you know, my heritage is this and that.
America is the land.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying, though. Is like she's saying just by being born in America, you wouldn't say that you're not going to be like, oh, my heritage and this is this and that. But I disagree with that. I'm saying like I think wholeheartedly especially if you're second, third, fourth, fifth generation like immigrants, you know what I mean? Like you can still sort of at least trace your culture back at least a little bit.
And what she's talking about is like literally like it seems first generation, you know, citizen of Austria
Right.
kind of thing. She's like,
Okay.
if you move there and your kids are born there, they'd go, yeah, I'm Austrian, but my heritage is and
This and I'm saying that's kind of the same here is what I would, you know what I mean? I think most people would do the same thing here. I think most people would be like, yeah, I'm American, I live here, but my heritage is really, they would not, I would argue that they would identify more with whatever their heritage is than being an American.
Okay, I kind of see your point, but I'd have to see like some polling or statistics on that to agree.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but I didn't prepare any.
Yeah, I know. It's not
of opportunity.
Actually, I think of the American dream, like just way from the dishwasher to a millionaire. You can make everything if you just wanted to.
Hey, she's like
make
Donovan.
it and do it.
I think like people look at America and they like idolize it. You know, like, oh, it's America. Yeah, like everyone wants to go to America.
I was pretty keen about going to America, but I think the whole Trump put me off. Like, I'm not as keen to go anymore. It wouldn't be the top of my list.
When I think of America, I think instantly.
It's really like crazy how much like the media influences that aspect of the world. Like it's like I just want people to know, like, despite the like politics of what you think of whoever is in charge here, like the politics really don't change the day to day here very much. Like whoever's in the White House really, I mean, I'm not saying it's not changing anything. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the day-to-day life here, if you want to come here and visit, especially as a tourist, it's not, I mean, obviously the main thing about coming here now is with all the COVID and restrictions and everything, that's more your issue with coming here now. But I would say before it wasn't really, I mean, just because a certain person is the president, like, I mean, that's not going to affect you to visit here.
It actually affects you more who's currently leading a state than the president.
Right.
Day to day.
Yeah, if you're going to go visit a state.
Big true.
Research your state that you're going to more than
who's your mayor.
That's a big tip to anybody visiting is, you know, if you're visiting, you got to remember each state has its own laws and things. So, you know, just because one thing is true in one state doesn't mean it's true in another. So make sure you know the laws, the ins and outs before you get in trouble doing something.
That's for foreign travelers and domestic travelers.
Yeah, that's, you know, any of my fellow Americans out there that didn't know that laws are different in other states, they are, so.
I think that's most Americans.
Yeah, maybe.
That's me being depressed about my own lot in life as a history teacher. Anyway.
Alright, let's finish this video out.
About guns? Like, I just don't see why you need to have a gun.
In Poland, guns are really hard to get. It's still kind of illegal.
Here, it's not that easy to get a gun.
There's far too many guns in America. Of course, their laws need to be restricted, and it's really hard for us to understand.
220 million,
There's
actually.
no guns. The police aren't armed. It's just so
In
systemic
every
in your,
5 Americans.
culture. I don't know how you could change it, but you definitely need to try.
It's a big country, man.
Yeah.
Got big problems.
We do.
Yeah.
Big country. Have big problems.
I mean, they're not wrong.
No.
It's a big country. We
they're
do have
not.
big problems.
Everything's bigger in America, even our problems.
Especially our problems.
Oh, and also our food portions.
Well, we all are fat. And
Are
not
you fat,
push.
Donovan? I know I'm fat, but are you fat?
PH.
For my body type, I was gonna say pH. Don't get me wrong. I was going there. I totally was. But no, for my body type, yeah, I'm getting chubby. Thankfully, I'm
see-
back in
No,
a place
I'm
where I
actually
can eat
like,
a lot of
I'm not
pasta.
obese, but I am overweight. Like, actually, my doctor is like,
You just gotta
Hey,
distribute it
eat
better,
less.
like me. I'm not
"Okay,
necessarily.
Mr.
I'm not.
insane metabolism over here.
No, it's the same with me. I'm like, you know, out of shape
I've
and
got
like
a
heavy in the
bit
wrong
of a
ways.
gut now,
Right,
yeah.
same. Heavy in the wrong ways. All right, let's pop out the rest of these facts.
That means shut up, Donovan, and me.
God, okay.
Negative fact number 3. 40% of Americans don't think gay marriage should be legal. Now that's something I put as a negative fact. Some people would argue, maybe that's a positive fact, because I would say probably in most places in the world it's not even that high or that low.
I actually agree with that as a civics matter in the negative column, because I don't believe the government should be involved in defining what a marriage is. So.
Right. I also don't, if it's gonna be a legal thing where people benefit from being in a marriage, financially, to have, this legal document, then it kind of just, I think we're kind of past it as a society. We've pretty much decided, gay marriage is going to be a thing. Gay people are going to be a thing. So I think we just need to kind of get over that, because but I'm somebody who's of the mindset that live and let live, let people do what the fuck they want. I mean, it doesn't affect you for some other guy to get married to some other guy. I mean, they're not taking that dude off the market for you, were they? I mean, I don't understand.
I mean, a little bit, but that's beside the point.
Right.
I would actually, a compromise, when this was all going on, a compromise I would have suggested if I had the power to do so would be, instead of defining all of those legal benefits as marriage benefits, define all of them as civil union benefits.
Yeah, but people would have had a problem with that too. People would have been like,
yeah,
but I don't. I just want to be married. People have a problem
with whatever happens, though.
People would have rioted.
Third positive fact.
Yeah.
The U.S. accounts for around 25% of the global economic output and has one of the highest GDP in the world.
Yep. No denying that's positive.
Big true. Well, like we said earlier, we don't take our vacations like we should.
Right. We work hard. And it does, show.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I get 3 months off a year.
Yeah.
More than that, technically, but I get 3 months in a row off a year.
Well, I think it's a general statistic. Fourth negative. America has the fourth largest wealth gap in the world, only topped by Chile, Mexico, and Turkey, and it's growing by 4% each year.
Hey, oof. You're gonna be at the top of that list soon. Yay, American exceptionalism.
I would argue that's more of a late stage capitalism issue, but
ooh, that's another episode.
Yeah.
Fourth positive fact. Ironically, while we have the largest wealth gap, we also have the greatest wealth jumps of any other country in the world. More people becoming rich than anywhere else in the world, more billionaires, more millionaires. To kind of also elaborate on that, we have more people who push into and out of the top 10% and top 1% wealth ranges than anywhere else in the world. You have there's a lot of, it's not the same people always in the top 10% of earners in America. It's constantly changing.
Well, and I would also point out that our standard of living of our poor is also significantly greater than anywhere else in the world. So,
Depending on how poor you are.
as a general statistic, standard of living for our poor is greater than anywhere else in the world. I'm not denying that there's probably really poor people in our country, but are we talking about general statistics or specific anecdotes?
I'll give this one to you for now.
I concede now.
This is a battle for another day.
Yeah, like, you know.
All right, last negative fact. 62% of personal bankruptcies are caused by medical bills, and of these, 72% of people had health insurance at the start of their condition. In 1981, only 8% of bankruptcies were due to medical costs. So in the span of 30 years, we have, or 40 years, sorry. In the span of 40 years, we have jumped 54%.
Don't disagree, that's negative and a problem.
That's why medical tourism exists.
I think that's a... I mean, I think that in and of itself is a big pharma and stuff, and people's hatred of the medical system. I think that's a big part of like hatred for the bigger, like big government and stuff, and America as a whole. Like a lot of people feel betrayed by, you know, the medical systems, and then subsequently their government.
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole I could dig into.
I was just about to.
And before you
might be a
do,
topic for another.
One positive fact to wrap it up, and then I think we'll probably wrap up this episode for this time, unless somebody else had something. But I will say the last positive fact is we are the most scientifically minded country in the world, believe it or not, with 27.8% of the 1.27 million research papers that are published being, in this last year, being scientific papers, that is. They were Americans that published them. China was in second with 14%. And also, we have one of the highest atheist populations that is rising each year. And I kind of felt like those two were potentially a little bit related, even though, you know, you said, we sort of said earlier that, you know, you can believe both evolution and God, which I agree, but I also think that I think typically if you're very into science and, you know, if you're more into science than you are religion, than you are spiritual, then I would say you're probably an atheist.
Agnostic at best.
Yeah, you're usually not a spiritual person. You're very physical. You need to be able to prove it, you need to be able to see it.
Empirical.
Right.
I get you. I can't say that I agree with you on the growing number of atheists. I agree with you on the first part. I think it's good to be scientifically minded.
Agree on it being positive, or just agree on it being a thing?
No, agree on it being positive. Which
I was like, well, I didn't make it up, but
yeah. No. I know that statistic is real. I can't. I don't think it's a good thing.
I'm sort of in the mindset that I think Well, I'm kind of conflicted, right? Because I myself am an atheist, so of course I'm going to be like, yeah, sure, fucking more people, the more the merrier. You think the same thing as me? Okay, sure. But at the same time, I do sort of think that it's important to have like religion in a society. Okay, I don't know if it's necessarily religion, right? But I think that it's important to have something that ties us together morally and like that
A spirituality.
something, whatever it is. And if we don't have that, then I do think that it's an issue. So we have to substitute it with something if it's not going to be religion.
Right. I'll actually point to the example of a bit of history for you. George Orwell was notably an atheist, but he went to church every week and kind of kept his atheism on the down low. And when he was asked sort of later in his life why he did that, he sort of said for that very reason. He said, you know, I don't see a better replacement in society to the benefits religion does give us than what its benefit gives us. I myself am an atheist, but I don't have anything to replace religion with that would be better. So it's sort of that sort of feeling where it's like you don't believe it, but you do see the benefits of it. I guess I could say. I guess you could say.
I see the
kind of what you're getting at?
I mean, I see the benefits of a community, right? I see the benefits of having a joint collect. I mean, there's
a moral framework.
There's a reason why Japan, while yes, it's one of the most xenophobic places in the world, and it's mostly just Japanese people that live there. There's not a whole lot of cultural mixing going on there, but they also don't have a lot of crime. They don't have a lot of other things that we have, and a big part of that is because they have a very similar sense of morality and sense of tradition and culture, and if we don't have that, then that I think that causes a lot of the conflict, and that's why
it's part of the social framework is basically what you're getting at.
Right. It's like it's sort of the fallout of us being a melting pot almost is that we have this conflict of culture and we have all these different ideas all hitting each other and stuff, and so there's a lot of like us trying to figure out like who America really is, and because we don't really have like a solid identity to really hold us together, I don't know, especially with us losing more and more patriotism and more religion. I mean, I just don't see how in the future we really expect to stand united. I just see it becoming more fractured, to be honest with you.
Always good to end on a depressing note.
Sorry, I'm just saying, it's my... While I... Hopefully things like this, you know, these talks will, you know, maybe change people's minds or turn things around. It's just, it's so polarized.
My friends. Space travel will save us.
I will consider this a success if it teaches people that, hey, we can be friends and have honest and frank discussions with people we disagree with. That is a success in my book.
And that is a success in my book. And with that, I think we will wrap it up. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you liked what you saw here today. It really helps us, and be on the lookout for any sort of highlights and things like that in the coming week. Thanks for tuning in.